Okay, motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. Item 3A, public comments. Casey, do we have any public comments this evening?
We do not.
Thank you. As a reminder, anyone wishing to provide public comments should complete the request to submit comments form, which is available on our website. This form will need to be completed by 1 p.m. on Wednesday, the day of the board meeting. Next item is item 4, consent agenda items. What are the wishes of the board?
I would move for approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please cast your vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. And item 6A, district infrastructure updates.
Okay. We have part 2 of our district infrastructure update, and we have Mrs. Pam Stranathan, Assistant Superintendent of Business Operations, Mr. Corey Nicolette, Director of Maintenance and Grounds, and then Mr. Caleb Brooks, Assistant Director.
On the infrastructure, and then later we'll talk a little bit more about procurement of going in and starting to look at moving forward so that we do not miss the summer deadline to get some of these projects started. Kate also has information within the budget that will help with our capital outlay numbers to share what that amount would look like to move forward. The procurement process will be kind of like the bid process, where we've asked to go out for bids, except we'll be asking to go out to bids and the cooperative to be able to start on the tip. So that will come a little bit later. I'm going to turn over. Some of the document has changed just a little bit. Corey may just jump over, like Kansas Avenue, since that's kind of changed. That will change in the order of where that would fall within this information. So I will turn it over to Corey and Caleb.
I did bring extra books. Does anybody need an extra book or anything? Okay. So to start, I'm just going to recap real quick kind of how the book was set up. It's been a month since we talked last, so just make sure everybody's on the same page. For approximate cost, it means the numbers have been calculated for that specific project. So we have, that's a better number. It's going to be more accurate than when I use estimated. Estimated is more going to be a broad range, or where we just used a square footage number and threw that on the document instead of looked at that particular project. Upper subtotal is where when we had a range for subtotals, I used the highest end of that range. So this is kind of the worst case scenario, or hopefully the worst case scenario. And then where there's an asterisk, it means we are in some way working on that project beyond it being labeled in the book. So just wanted to bring that back up to remind everybody. And then we will start with the middle school on page 13 of the book. The first thing we're talking about is the athletic track. Last year there was discussion on that, and it didn't get better in that last year, so it's still in pretty bad need of repair. The carpet in the middle school is original to the building in several sections, so we'd really like to update that. My hope is that we can match it with the carpet we were talking about for the high school, so that we'd have some continuity there, maybe in some cost savings buying bigger amounts of that product. There's several doors, again, original to the building, that we've babied along for the years, but they need full replacements. The JV gymnasium is just a basic servicing, so that's pretty good there. And then HVAC, we have a training room there that when the unit was set up, the type of unit it is can be used in different ways. It was not set up to optimize the way we're using it. So they want to go through and get that set up correctly. That way we're being more efficient and actually getting the results that the unit's capable of giving us. So we don't have a cost on that yet. It's something we're going to probably have to do, but I don't have a cost yet for that. And then more into the kind of what we're going to be talking about in like a year is going to be replacing the units on the middle school that weren't replaced previously. So Not an immediate need, but something I wanted to bring on here because there is a lot of HVAC discussion and there are a lot of HVAC problems. So just to show that we are seeing those, but priority-wise, those didn't make the very top of the list for what we really need to do right now. The back loop of the middle school, if you've been through it, I'm sure you don't have to be told it's not in very good shape. It doesn't drain correctly. It's a safety hazard for anybody trying to walk through it. So we'd really like to redo that back loop behind the middle school and then tie it into the new parking lot we have on the west side of the building. There's some plumbing issues that, if you recall, we had to shut school down partway through the day here a few months ago when we tried to address one of the plumbing issues. The rest, we're hoping we can make it till summer to do those over the summer. And then we have some recommended roofing repairs. And what I want to talk about that is the recommended roofing repairs that RTI provided us, we're not doing those all in one blanket thing. We're addressing them in the what's leaking, what's causing damage, what's going to cost us more money. When we get those addressed, then we'll come back and do the what do we need to do for longevity stuff. So we're not trying to throw a huge amount of money and cruise at everything. We're trying to spread that out over the schools and get the worst problems addressed first. Windows, we have 6 windows that we've replaced so far, and we have 2 more going in on Friday for those originals that are in really bad shape. We'd really like to get the 42 other worst windows replaced over this summer, and there are 61 originals. So we have more to do, but the difference of those nearly 20 windows is enough. I don't think we have to do it right now. So prioritizing our money expenditures and time, because we want to get as much done over summer break, the 42 is what we're kind of looking at there. And then you'll see there's some pictures. Again, the pictures are just kind of representative overall. And then I want to bring your attention to the map. It's page 18 in your book. This map is showing the areas that we looked at for the carpet, the blue and the green. We'd really like to do them all at once. If we don't do them all at once, it makes it harder to match carpet. Then we end up with kind of a weird timing situation. So the other side is while the crews are in there, let's just get it all done is the outlook we'd like to take. Next we have Jones, which we're working with McCown Gordon on. So what problems we have had, they've been really good and responsive about addressing those. The $1,100 was what was found in the RTI assessment. Other than that, that building's looking really good still. And then as Pam said, we'll skip over Kansas Avenue for now, and then Logan Elementary. We're going to be building 2 calming rooms in 2 of the classrooms over this summer. That's already in the works. We're working with a local contractor to do part of the job, and we'll do part of it. And then that will take over the classes that were at Kansas Avenue when they moved to Logan. That's what those are for. There's a manhole junction box in the front. It's the one picture that's included for this school that has a hole in it. And I guess kids are using that as a play toy. So when we get the invert at the high school done, we'll probably see if that company can do this one also, because they're very specialized in that type of thing. And then we have roofing repairs there that, again, we are addressing kind of throughout. Next school is Riverside. Riverside had a pretty good report overall. The fire dampers in that building, there's pretty much every room in that building has its own HVAC unit. And so if there's a fire alarm or fire sensed, there's dampers that close. So what we found is over the 20 plus years that those schools have been in service, those dampers have not been upkept like we'd like to see. So what we're talking about doing is going through and changing all the actuators so that those fire dampers work per code and we don't have issues with them either getting stuck open or closed, because either one's bad in different ways. The other thing we want to do with that project is right now to test it, we have to shut that whole portion of the building off. We have to turn the electrical off and let that whole building respond. So we want to put a switch on every one so that we can isolate when we have problems for future proofing, not wasting as much time and money trying to seek a problem out. We'll be able to test each unit individually. And then again, they had some roofing repairs. Timmerman is essentially the same thing as Riverside for our report. They have the same actuators, they're the same age, we want to do the same thing. So that's reflected, that's why they're the same in those. Village Elementary, with the bond, we did a lot there, so it didn't have as many things, but the parts of the building that we didn't touch with the bond, a lot of the doors are getting very old. Some of them are past their service life. You open them, you can't get them closed kind of deal. So we've kind of prioritized which ones are the worst for the list that was submitted separately. And then the boilers just need a service, which if you remember from the other ones, there's a few other boilers that need serviced. We're pretty much going to be going through the whole district and either doing a major or minor overhaul on all our boilers to give us a good line in the sand that, from here, we were good and we know what we've got. Walnut Elementary, the front doors that are mentioned here were actually completed last week. So they need some paint, but other than that, that project is done. So that's good. I'm glad to see one thing comes off our list over this. Need to service the boiler again, and then roofing repairs. So overall, Walnut's still in really good shape. William Allen White, the site of the current bond that we're working on. On the bond, we talked about doing all the roof units, which we could effectively get rid of the boiler. We could get rid of that whole steam system that we're currently using. I would like to revisit that. There's a lot we gain by going that route that at the time wasn't chosen, that we're gonna have to sink money into to go around. So all the steam lines throughout that building, since that decision was made, we've had 2 that gave out on us. One was on a Friday, and the other one I think was like on a Thursday. So both times we ended up paying out-of-town welding crews to come in and do confined space welding. That whole building, every steam pipe in there needs torn out and put back in. The money we're gonna put into an old, outdated system to fix that, which is not gonna be optional because these are falling apart as we speak, would be better served put into all rooftop units that solve other problems in addition to the problem we are having now. Another side of that is the controls. We don't have great controls over that building with the air system, and I know the air system's going away, but with that steam system, the controls on that just aren't as good as what the rooftop units are. And the rooftop units would save us money on the controls based on how they work and how they communicate with the system we use, which is reliable. We need to service the boiler there. Again, if we go to the rooftop units, the amount we need to put into the boiler for longevity is less than if that is our sole system. There's some recommended roofing repairs. If we go back to looking at redoing all the HVAC units, if you recall the way that roof is set up, the HVAC units necessitated the roof being redone. So we're really knocking out 2 major projects with one big ticket item. So those recommended roofing repairs, we're gonna do what's gonna end up costing us money as far as leaks or safety issues. But the other stuff that maybe need to be done would be done in the roofing deal. So we have a little potential savings there also. And then the shed was already added, so it's in place, it's already being used, so that one's off of our list also. Any questions so far on what we've gone over thus far through the book?
Was at the middle school, you said that HVAC training room, like that you train people on, or like it was a room for?
It's a multi-purpose room.
Oh, okay.
And they use it for training. It's like at their weights and that kind of stuff.
That's what I thought, but then I thought, well, maybe you do some on-site training.
Not that I know of.
Okay, all right. Just thought I'd ask. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Sure. Okay, Operational Services Center, which is where my office is housed, just had some roofing repairs, so we were pretty good there. Transportation had nothing major and immediate. Doesn't mean there's nothing. We've always got projects working. Remember, this is not all inclusive. It just means that as far as the stuff that really we need to have a talk about, there's nothing at transportation, so that was really good news on that one. Mary Herbert, we spoke about last month. So if there were questions on that, I just wanted to take a break on that and make sure nobody had questions on Mary Herbert from last time. Okay. And then the last thing in the book we're going to talk about today, if there's no further questions, is just that your cost summary by building, how it's broken down. Remember, these have a lot of to be determines. So this book is very much a snapshot in time, right? At this time, this is what we believed it to be. So in that month that's happened, these totals have already changed. So just remember that. I did not update the book. I don't intend to change the book. The book is the book. So these totals are just very loosely what we're looking at. And then the next page is by the category, but the by the building is usually better for most people to follow along with what we're doing. Any questions over the book before we transition to the second document? All right. The second document I'd like to talk about is titled the Capital Outlay Priority Cost List Projects for Operations in 2023 and 2024. And what I've done here is I've taken everything in this book and I've prioritized it in a first and second priority, and I took athletics out of that and put that kind of between the two. So it's included in the first priority because we need athletics, but it's not the same type of need as HVAC and plumbing and that kind of stuff. So I did separate that out just so we could see it. The first priority list, if you look at the chart, it starts by telling you the school description. The description may be slightly different than what's in the book. In the book, I had, carpet and then XYZ. When I broke it down by school in this format, those titles went away. So I did add like carpet or something to help make sure that everybody knew which item we were talking about. Other than that, it should be a one-to-one match to most things in the book. The cost is the same as in the book, unless we had an update. And that's an important part I want to make out, that the prices and costs on here do reflect some of the information we've gathered over the last month. So while the book is what we believed at the time 6 weeks ago as I was making the book, this is kind of the update for now. So if there are number differences, go by this document, not the book, for what numbers we're looking at. The next step, you'll see that it's one of a few different things. We either have a maintenance task, that's something that we're going to handle within my department, or we're already handling, and it isn't at a price point that requires going to the board, or it's something that was kind of already in the works, such as like the roof. That's already been approved. We already have a bid accepted, so that's on us now. So maintenance task is something that's we're handling. You'll see that there's approved for bid, and then there's approved for bid tips. So some of the stuff we can use the cooperatives for, and that helps cut down the time required because we are on a crunch for some of the stuff to try to get summer projects done this year. The ones I have labeled as tips are stuff that I know that we have suppliers in a cooperative that we've worked with or have talked to about working with. So doesn't mean we've accepted a bid, doesn't mean we have a bid. All it means is that's somewhere that I know of somewhere we can go to expedite that project. And then beyond that, it's just what's already on the books for starting. And then the time to completion, because we are already at the end of March, stuff like HVAC units. By the time we get the bid drawn up and the technical documents to what we're doing and get through the bid process, it's not going to happen over this summer, unfortunately. So we're looking at winter break. We may be able to get a unit or two placed, probably more like next summer. So we'll have to get through another year, but at least we get through that year knowing that we've got a bid ready, and all we have to do is wait for work to start next summer. So when you look at this, those are just kind of the dates as I'm looking at it. We are going to try to get as much done through the summer break as we can, but it's just such an exhaustive list that it's not going to happen for all of it. So after we have the first priority list, we have the athletics. Actually, I put that in a separate section so they'd be easy to find. We are fairly confident that we can get those done this summer. So there's going to be some movement on those because we need to get them scheduled. The other reason for the time frame issues is I can't predict which contractor's going to have what timeline and what availability. So in effort to provide you with the most accurate data, I provided you with just a very broad statement. Until we get further in, then I can provide you more details on a timeline for individual projects as those projects actually move through the timeline. So just, if you have questions on that, I can kind of talk on some of them if anybody has a specific question. In general, we're very much playing catch up on getting these things sorted out. And then the last list we have is the second priority list. These are things that, when push comes to shove, we push these down to, we can make it longer if we have to. They still need done. They're not gonna go away. They are gonna get worse. But they're the lesser of the immediate needs. So total, we're looking at around just under $6 million for all of it. That does not include some of the to be determines. With that said, though, this is kind of worst case scenario, hopefully. So the to be determines and the worst case, maybe it'll balance out a little bit and we still stick around this number. Are there any questions on this document specifically? I'll give you a minute to look at it. It's hard to read, kind of small, but.
Well, fortunately for everyone, I have really good eyesight, so I'll start with a question.
Sure.
I, first of all, appreciate this list. I love a good list, and it's a lot. You and your team have a lot ahead of you. One of the things I do want to push back a little bit on is the high school parking lot, because I see that, your advice is to wait and then just favor partial repair. And so I worry that, are we going to be spending more money because we're just going to have to do some partial repairs to get us through until we can actually fix it. But I would also argue that our parking lot at the high school is in such bad shape that I think it's a safety issue. Just to see where there's, the potholes and the gaps. And I'm just concerned that that's getting pushed down, even though we've been talking about it at this table for a couple of years. And of course, we didn't have the big picture here, but that's just one thing that I would like to talk about, how that can be elevated.
So I would love to do it all. That, if we can finance it and I can schedule it, I would prefer to do it all. When I present what do we absolutely need, that's when I say we can go through and we can make it safe. It's never gonna look as good as doing the whole thing, but we can make it better than it is for that lower price. That's not a preference. That's if I had X amount of dollars and we had to do the best with every penny we could, that's when I'm gonna do partial parking lot. If I can do the whole thing, I'm gonna do the whole thing. I would rather do the whole thing, because we do the whole thing, we're done for years. If not, we've got to go back.
I'm going to step in on the finance part of that. When we started working on these lists, which has been well over 2 months ago, one of the things that's positive here is that now that we're getting closer to the year and our budget has really evolved, where they're broken down is kind of how we've divided them out. So that first priority would be what we would go forward in this budget year. And remember, our next budget year hits July 1st. So then we can pull in money from the next year's budget to do that second phase, which is what's a positive about that is that we could then, with hitting that next year's budget, because it's only $1 million and something coming out of there, potentially it could be $2 million coming out of the capital outlay because of those unknowns. But then to be able to look at that option and to make sure when we bid out the parking lot or we get that information is to find out, if we just do this, the simple repair, what is that going to cost compared to if we did the whole thing. So I feel pretty optimistic that that is an option now. We're in a much better spot right now tonight with that than what we were a few months ago when this was so still daunting, trying to get more information on cost and where we were sitting with our capital outlay and where our budgets are ending up for the year. So I think that's probably, I'm not going to guarantee it right now, but I'm pretty sure that's something that's going to come forth. The other thing with William Allen White, we've had extensive conversations about that, because when we bid that out with McCall Gordon, we did that so that we had those alternative bids, which is always good to do, because those bids are still good till the end of April. Is that right?
At least till the end of April.
So that's an option that we can still put in there out of the bond and have the bond be able to cover that and take care of that one, so it wouldn't have to be drawn out of that capital outlay. So that's one thing, when we move forward with any other bids, even the bids we'll do with Corey, we would want to make sure that we do alternates. So those bids are already done, and we have, the 30, 60, or 90, whatever the criteria is put on there, so that we are able to, if we have, 3 months later, finances can change to where we could be able to do one of those alternates, not have to wait a month to bid those out. So I know we want that parking lot done too. And so when we were we got, okay, what's our minimum on that we can do to make it safe? And then what's, the best case scenario where we can do the whole parking lot, so.
That's helpful, thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm still confused though. So does that mean that we could ask for a bid now for July based on us approving money then
Well, just on this, that's,
for the parking lot?
well, that's going through tips. So,
Tips the parking lot is one of the things we can use tips for. That's very good. The other side of that is that wouldn't be done till summer. So we're already probably gonna be past our July 1st change before that's done. But the tip should expedite that
yeah.
process.
So what we're asking for later is, normally we'd come and ask for let bids. And so with this list, later in the board meeting, we're gonna ask that the board approve for us to go ahead and start the bid process, and also go ahead and allow us to go ahead with the tips process. So if some of these can be done with tips, we don't have to vet those out. They've already been bid. Corey just goes, he gets the information, he finds out it's supposed to be the lowest bid through the cooperative, and then he would bring those back. So how it expedites, potentially, I don't know if it by April, but definitely by May, we can be coming back with the bids on these projects to get moving. And anything that's under 20, he can start moving on with that. So we're kind of doubling up tonight to say, hey, give permission so Corey can start this. Otherwise, it would be 2 months. We would be almost going into June. It's too late. Those companies will be looking at other options.
So the chance for a new parking lot is still plausible before school starts in August, or no? That's my question.
I think we can do it with all of them if we use the tips process.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
But on that note, we cannot really wait for anything. We're gonna have
Right.
to be moving pretty
Yeah.
quick on those.
Okay.
So if that should pass tonight, Corey will be making phone calls
Okay.
tomorrow. So,
Okay. So we're not talking about next summer.
Not for that, no.
Okay.
Anything with tips,
Okay.
Buy it.
Even if
It's-
it's on the secondary
Yeah.
list.
Yes.
Secondary. Okay.
anything
Okay.
with tips by it is,
Okay.
you can assume it's gonna take 2 to 3 months less
Okay.
than if it doesn't say that.
Okay. Thank you.
sorry for the confusion. It's a lot.
And then going back to the Band-Aid bit a little bit, we don't want to Band-Aid any of this. The Band-Aids that we recommend are if we have to Band-Aid it, we need to get to this point. This is the lowest point we can be at and still be fully functioning and safe. So does that kind of clear up or at least my stance on the parking lots and other things? Because there's other things that we gave options to in here. We don't want to do the lower option on any of them if we can just get it done right and be done.
The
But if
goal-
we have to, that's what we presented.
The goal, if we can get this done, Corey and I were having this conversation, this gets us, brings us back into reality with where we are at. And it gets us at a really good point to where if some of this had to be not Band-Aid, but, just temporary, some things put in, it would only be because we're having to wait until either equipment's coming in or the people that we're contracting with, they can't get us on their cycle for, repair. And so it would get us until that. It's not like this is Band-Aid, 5 years later, we're gonna take a look at it. These are the top priority of things that within hopefully 18 months, which I know sounds like a long time, will be done. It'll be caught up and we will be back in a really good spot in the district. Then we're looking at more preventative maintenance instead of these major repairs. So.
I had a question. So don't take this wrong, because I fully support using the TIPS process, and I know it, as you've talked about, it's much more expedient in many cases. And I know most of the time it's the lowest bid, but are there times where there could be other alternatives that might be lower?
Yes. So what happens with the tips is they have to bid to the cooperative. And then what happens is you can go on there and you can pick which company, and you can have conversations with which company, and they can give back information and quotes to you, and you can pick from there and it used to be really tight, like they would only give you the lowest bid, and you kind of risk. Now there's more conversation that can occur. We even have had vendors that we use that we've shared with them, hey, do you know about tips? Do you know about buy board? And told them where to go for that, just because of we use them, and it helps us to vet those and not have to go through that vetting process, and they check into their background, make sure everything's good with them. So it really does. We've got several vendors that are going through that. That's band uniforms. I mean, there's just an array of things you can do through.
TIPS also puts pricing limits on what they can charge. So if you're a TIPS vendor and you want to charge $500 per ton of concrete instead of $8, TIPS won't let you do that. When you submit a TIPS bid, the TIPS cooperative looks at the bid and says, are these reasonable numbers for your area, for the project, for all that? So you may find a lower bid somewhere else by going through the full bid process, but you are competitive in TIPS no matter what through the cooperative, because that's what they do. They're making sure that you're competitive, but the quality side is they are vetting the companies before they allow them into the cooperative. So you don't have any insurance issues, you don't have any, we had unqualified people on the job site issues. All that gets funneled right back into TIPS if that is a problem for that. So it's safer in some ways versus picking our own just from anybody that happens to throw a bid at us.
Okay, good info. Thank you.
Just to revisit something you said earlier, when you said this would take 18 months for the whole list or just the first priority list?
For what we looked at is our goal would be for this whole list to be done in 18 months
Okay.
At the max.
And that would be if we approve all of it today.
Yes, not
Okay.
to approve this, but to approve us to go ahead and move forward with the bidding and using of the cooperative.
Okay.
So kind of like the let bid,
Yeah. Okay.
A lot of this will be done long before that.
because they're already in the process.
The large pieces of the HVAC are kind of the big wild card. Because one, we are gonna have to do a full bid process. There's a lot of technical write-ups per unit that has to be done before we can even get the bid package started. So we're looking at a couple months there before we even have a bid package. Then the bid time, then the approval time, and then we have to get with a contractor to order something. And then we have to wait however many months for that unit to arrive. So when we say the 18 months, we're mostly looking at HVAC is gonna be hopefully by the end of next summer. The vast majority of this list, if it's not HVAC, I'd really like to have it done much sooner than that. And that's just gonna be based on how fast approvals come through, how fast quotes and bids and materials come through.
I have one more question, and this could maybe be for Caleb or for you, Corey, but, you know, as we get through this list, and I'll be really happy in 18 months when everything's checked off, like, what do you have in mind, or what's your plan, so that way we don't get in this situation again? Like, what's the preventative plan? And I see Caleb coming up, so if he wants to take a stab at this too, but I just want to make sure that we don't get into where we've been in the past. And so what's the plan going forward?
So with all this stuff, everything has a life cycle, right? And we're far enough into the technology, we have an idea what that life cycle is. You know, say you have a roof unit, it has a life cycle of 10 to 15 years. So after we get caught up to where we're not just putting out fires, the goal is to go through and say, okay, you know, how many units do we need to be replacing a year across the district per school so that we're never outside that, say, 15-year cycle for that type. So instead of, hey, I need $2 million for HVAC for the high school, it's, I need $100,000 a year for HVAC across the district because we're gonna replace this unit and this unit. We're gonna replace this unit and this unit. So every year, we would be doing more projects than we had done in the past, but they would never be catastrophic in the price category. They would always be something that we could budget well ahead of time. We, you know, obviously if we get a bad hailstorm or something, you know, could change things, or tornado, there's always that stuff, but in the stuff we can anticipate, we would have all that planned out. And so we wouldn't even have to worry about which unit needs to go next. We already know. You know, we're gonna do unit 1, then 3, then 7, then 9, and that'll be planned out.
Talk a little bit about your preventative maintenance that we talked about this.
So the preventative maintenance, it's been behind, which is part of the reason we're here. So we have the IQ, right? And in that, I forget what it stands for. What's IQ? Do you remember the name?
No, I couldn't tell you
Okay,
that,
IQ is the short version of the program
The
that
program we
we
use.
have. And in that program, you can identify every HVAC unit, every water fountain, every water heater, every toilet, and then when they go work on it, they can mark where, you know, We worked on it, here's what we did. So as that system gets built over the next few years, we'll have very easy access to what needs replaced, what is working, what isn't working, and we won't miss stuff for preventative maintenance because we'll be able to see. I can pull up any unit, hey, this unit went down. Yes, it was maintained, or no, it wasn't. So once we have that data, it'll help us create programs to have that preventative maintenance. And I believe we can set where it tells us, hey, we can set on a 6-month, trigger. Every 6 months it kicks up, hey, unit 7 needs a belt and filter, whatever it is. So we want to integrate that system, but we don't have the capacity to do that with all the fires we're putting out right now and just playing the catch up. The other side of that is when we get new units, that's the best time to put them in, right? We put these 10-year unit in, we know what we did the last year or two. We don't have that previous data. So as a new unit goes in, it goes in the system. It has a born on date, and we can keep track of that really easily that way.
Yeah, I just want to thank you for all the work you put into this. I know we said that last time, but this sheet in particular, just the explanation, really helps us. We get confronted about transparency a lot, especially when it comes to spending, and I think this is helpful across the board for everyone. And also the information about tips is that's comforting as well, to know that they're looking at things like that, because I think, again, people get suspicious, or they think we're not doing our due diligence and getting the best possible price, looking at liability and things like that. And so to hear that and get that assurance from you, I think can give us peace of mind and can give the public the peace of mind that they want in terms of being responsible with, the bond is one thing, but being responsible with all of our funds. So thank you so much for the work that went into this and for explaining it.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
The next item on our agenda is item 7A, construction update from Macau Gordon.
Okay, Mr. Eric Wolsey is back to give us an update on William Allen White.
Good evening. It's been a little bit since we've done one of these. So we've started the 9th and final project of the bond. So that's very exciting. Just kind of wanted to touch here briefly on the schedule. So we actually started the month of March. Plan is to have kids back in there full operational and construction gone by next fall for the next fall school year, so 2025. So that's kind of what the timeline shows. But I really wanted to start with a little bit of recap because it has been a while since we've talked about William Allen White. It was back in December, if you remember, we brought the guaranteed maximum price to y'all. So wanted to just touch on this really quick of everything that's happening at William Allen White. So west side there in kind of the darker yellow or orangish color is new on-street parking that is being added. Everything in green within the existing building footprint, that is all renovation areas, whether it's HVAC upgrades, new office space. We're taking over a classroom and creating a bigger office space similar to some of the other elementaries we've done. Working on some ADA accessibility items within the kindergarten rooms where those current restrooms are. That'll happen over the summer. And then the southwestmost room will turn into a new media center. And then the purple area that you see there, so that is the new addition. So that includes a new music room, a new kitchen area, and then a new multi-purpose / storm structure. So similar thing for all the bonds. Safety, security is a big priority with the bond. So that will be the new storm shelter. And then some miscellaneous site work around there as well. So any questions before I jump into a little bit of pictures? I don't have a whole lot of pictures because we did just get started, but any questions? Okay, so actually over spring break, while kids, teachers, staff, faculty were out, the abatement company came in, remediated all the miscellaneous floor tile and mastic that was under there. So that's kind of why you see the rough looking concrete there. So that's going to help us get a head start this summer. We had air clearances that took place, make sure everything was out of the building. So that all happened that Thursday of spring break. So everything was good. Everything was cleared. That allowed Corey and his team to be able to move items back into those classrooms prior to students, faculty, and staff showing back up following spring break. So those are the two pictures on the left. The two on the right are actually some demolition, getting ready to start really, and that started this week. So we've actually already stocked sheetrock just to took advantage of getting some items in there prior to school starting. But demo is full speed ahead in the office area and the one classroom that we took over. So we are waiting on the kindergarten rooms and where the new media center will go. That will start this summer, along with some HVAC replacements. If you've driven by outside, you'll also notice we have started earthwork. So where the new addition goes, we've kind of got a little bit of a pit that we'll begin bringing back up. So that's really where we're at. Once demo's done, which will hopefully be by the end of this week, first part of next week, we'll start overhead rough in that new office space. So any questions that y'all have?
Do we have any questions? Nope. Well, thank you very
Thanks.
much.
You bet. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thanks. Drive safe. The next item is item 7B, introduction of IMA Corporation.
All right, Pam Stranahan's going to introduce our new insurance brokers.
I get a good workout on these nights. So, all right. Well, I'm excited to have Lisa Clark and Nick White here with IMA. I know that some of you know them and have known them since they were little, but just excited to have them on board. I want to say kudos to them because they have followed through with their commitment. They have been in touch with us. We've talked. They've had a little bit of change in their business model, but it has not messed up our progression moving forward, and we're excited about that. So I'm going to turn it over and let them just say hi to you. Make sure you ask them a lot of questions, right? So.
Hi, everyone. Nick White. Thanks for the opportunity to partner with you all. It's kind of surreal graduating from Emporia High a few years ago and now being back here to get back to the community. So thanks for that involvement. One thing I know, Jen, you mentioned was around transparency. That's how our company has been built. And so you'll see full transparency on the employee benefits, staying in compliance with HIPAA law and everything else. But from what we can provide, you will all be notified working with Pam and Kate and the team. So thank you for the opportunity. Glad to come back and see my family too here when we're here. So just appreciate that. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lisa Clark, and I am the Employee Benefit Market Leader for the Kansas City market. And we're really happy to be in partnership. We appreciate the opportunity. We take it very seriously. We take a very servant's approach to the relationships that we have in assisting you and your team in delivering the benefits to your employees and to their dependents. I truly believe that we work for them, and in doing that and making sure that we're taking care of them, we're taking care of everyone in this room and the goals and initiatives that you have for the district. So thank you for the partnership. And we really will take questions if you have them.
What questions do we have?
If you don't have any, that's great too.
I was gonna say, Jeremy and I were on the insurance committee, and we saw your presentations, and it was, you guys were the clear winner with that committee, and we really talked at length in our meeting when we voted on this. So I think you guys just did a really great job of explaining everything, and I think what we're most looking forward to is making it so that more of our people want to be on our insurance and getting us back to a level that's reasonable. Not just going back a little bit so that it's as bad as it was a year ago, but better. So we're just really eager and thankful.
Absolutely. The one thing we can assure you is that we will provide the transparency. And I firmly believe transparency empowers us to make the best decisions. So working together, we'll be able to do that. And we look forward to getting started as well. So thank you. And that thank you doesn't mean I won't take more questions, but if there are, let me know. Otherwise, we really are grateful to be a part of your team. So, thank you. Thanks.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is item 7C, budget update.
All right, I'm back. Okay, so I feel like the next contestant on our presentations for the business department is Kate. So Kate is going to present to you about the budget. She's worked really hard. She's been given a directive, though, to keep it short because we could talk budget all night long. And then we'll talk a little bit about, at the end of the presentation, we're going to talk about republishing because we had good news. Our student numbers went up. So guess what? We have money at the state that we would like them to give to us and not leave on the table. So I'll turn it over to Kate.
Thank you very much. So in going through the budget and looking at where things are, here are the highlights of the presentation. The first thing I'm sure you're concerned about is capital outlay. With the presentation earlier tonight, you're wondering where that stands. We started the year with a little over $4 million, which is just under $1 million more than we started the year before. We currently have a little over $6.5 million available. Obviously, there's a big ticket items on that, and we like to leave a little bit moving forward to the next year. We don't like to spend it all in one year and have that buffer for things that might happen starting in July before we get our first funding. And we also have some remaining needs. Above and beyond the infrastructure improvements, we also have transportation and technology needs that we typically take out of the budget annually, and we have not done that to this point. On the next slide, you'll see our general fund number before republishing that Mrs. Stranathan talked about, and some of the places that money goes and the very specific uses we have for it. It's not just a pot with no designation. It all, from the weightings, it goes in, and then we spread it out to the different departments. So that tells you some of the things that we have to spend money on based on the budget. The next slide lets you know how much we've spent, and I broke it down in categories that I felt like would mean something to you. Building-related expenses, your teachers, your strategists, your things like that, building principals, also the student transportation, and it shows you what we've spent so far and what the budget was, and we really, on those accounts, are where they should be at this point in the year. The next slide, similar to the previous one, this is the LOB and what our amount is and some areas that money goes to and what we have to spend those on. The next slide does the same thing as the general fund. It tells you what we've spent, what the budget was, and once again, we are at basically where we would expect to be at this time of the year with that budget. I just put on the next special purpose account slide, it has information on funds and how much money is in there, and just an idea of what the specific purposes are for those. Those aren't general money that we can decide. We have to fit within guidelines on what we can spend those on. So that's money that's dedicated to a certain purpose. The last slide and the green arrows kind of tell you some of the different weightings where we got extra money, extra funding, kids. And so that's where the increase in $790,000 would come from above what we budgeted.
So this is where we'll have to come back to you. Just to give you kind of a timeline on the supplemental to republish our budget, we would have to bring that back to the Board of Education for approval for the notice to go into the paper. It's just like we do it back in July on April 10th. And we can't do it sooner because of the number of days that we have to leave it in the paper before the hearing. So we couldn't get it into the next board meeting. And then we'd had the hearing around May 8th, and then we'd have that budget to be approved on May 8th, in which then we can go through. There's the deadline of May 10th?
May 15th,
15th.
the state would prefer you finish the process.
Yeah, so we have to have it done before that. So, so that you'll see that coming back so that we can go get that money. So, any questions or?
I think it's very rare that you get to come to us and tell us about more money. So, like, best presentation tonight.
You won the contest this time, Pam.
Are there any questions?
I did have a question on the capital outlay slide. So right now we have the $6,551,000 available, and the total on here is 5.9, almost 6. So, in theory, we'd have 5, but some of this would be coming out of the
Correct.
next fiscal year's budget. So do we have any idea what the total on those remaining needs are and what our goal carryover is for next year?
So I can talk a little bit about the needs, and then Kate can share a little bit about the carryover. So when Corey and I and Caleb had a conversation about how to prioritize those, we put it so that it leaves money for them to have a little bit of buffer. It leaves money for us to finish out transportation and technology needs for the end of this year. And then you want to talk about the carryover on, so we'll have carryover that will go over, that we can carry over, and then it'll just add on to what our capital will be. And then that's where we can pull in and finish out those projects in the next year's budget cycle. Which should still leave us, let's say in a perfect world, let's say Corey had, with his to be determined, ended up to be where the million he had, and let's say 2 million, we'll say he finishes out everything, so it's about 3, so that would leave us potentially 4.5, somewhere around there, wouldn't you say?
Typically, we like to carry over about 4. We do have still more money coming in from the state. I didn't have that part of our presentation. I'm anticipating the transportation and the technology, I don't have a number on, but usually the buses run around $200,000 to $250,000. So we've got those. The key we have to remember is that's all based on our taxes. So we need to leave enough money to carry forward to keep us going for any surprises or any of these projects we want to, that we don't get bid now, to get us by until we get our next tax payment.
I think we're all, unless Corey says differently, I think we're all, and what I'm saying from the multitude of conversations we've had, we're really comfortable with the money we have, the money we're going to have, and the projects and how we've split those up to be able to get that sheet done. Which is, phenomenal on Corey and Caleb's part for getting all of that put together and getting us into that spot and having that information to us, so that then Kate and I can work those numbers and look at those and be able to split that up, for them and get, we were excited today. Corey and I were talking, if we can get to this point, we've took a lot of years of damage to a lot of space and time and put it to a halt. So it's exciting. We can get the birds out of the air conditioning units on top of the high school. Those are great cages, but they're not working well for what we need them for, so.
I have a couple of follow-up questions. So I think you all sort of mentioned, I think what's something that's really important is that when we talk about capital outlay, our mind always first goes to building needs. And capital outlay is a lot more than just taking care of our buildings. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that so we all get a sense, or can all be reminded what comes out of there?
Yeah, so capital outlay is your brick and mortar, if you think of it in your district. You can't take salaries out of there. There are salaries that are approved that you could take out of, like service salaries, things like that, contractual salaries, but to keep it just in a simple form for people to understand, it's the brick and mortar. We can take reconditioning of helmets out of there. We can take technology out of there. We can take any of our web-based programs that we're using with students, we can take that out of there also. So it's broad in a big picture, but it's also very limited on what you can do with that, so.
Yeah, thanks for that reminder. And then, Kate, you mentioned that you like to carry over about $4 million, is that right? And then, of course, we like to anticipate surprises. So I'm kind of curious if, and maybe this is to share with us later, but in the past, like what kind of surprises and how much have they sort of cost annually? Has it always been around $4 million that, or does it vary a lot, or?
Well, it's not, and we're having more of those, and that's why it's important to kind of deal with the list and the infrastructure updates. A perfect example is the water leak at the high school. That was something that capital outlay would pay for. If that happens after and we've spent it all, it's got to come out of the general fund. It's got to come out of the general maintenance budget instead of capital outlay. So it's not a good idea to start the year that you've spent it all and you're waiting for your LOB, your tax payments to come in to reestablish that. So it could vary a little bit and we could go a little lower, but for the most part, we get about 4 million, we spend about 4 million, so we keep that in case something big happens that we're prepared for it. And we always budget to spend all of it and hope we don't have to.
Thank you. Anything else? Great, well, thank you very much.
I think, am I still up here?
Yeah, it is you.
It's me again.
7D, capital projects procurement.
Okay, so this is what we were asking about on that list, is if you look at the recommendation for the action there would be to move and to approve solicitation for quotes for the capital projects through the bid process and/or state bid or other purchasing cooperatives that the district would be able to submit these to. We still, by law, would have to bring those back. So even if it's through TIPS, we still have to bring it back because it would be over the 20,000. The only ones that wouldn't come back is under the 20,000. So this just allows to start putting those bids together, getting those bids out there, and we can start tomorrow, which we'll have that conversation with Carrie, and then it also allows Corey to start making communication on the tip side with the cooperative part of that to get moving forward with it. So I know we kind of put them all together and fired off at it, and I apologize for that because I know that process has been, but we were so worried about missing the summer. So
Thank you. Do we have any questions? This is an action item.
I move to approve soliciting the quotes for capital projects through the bid process and/or state bid or other purchasing cooperatives that the district is a member of as submitted.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please cast your vote.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. Item 7E, Category 1.
Thank you.
Oh. I thought you were still standing up here, so I was moving on. Category 1, E-rate bid for internet services.
Okay, we have Mr. Paul Beatles, Director of Information Technology, here to share information.
Absolutely. On this first set, we are looking at our internet contracts as well as our WAN contract that connects all district facilities back to Mary Herbert. Run this through E-rate, which is awesome. Given E-rate approval, we'll get a 80% reduction in the cost to us. So that's where we're looking at the $16,901 annually to tie our billings together. I think currently, on just an average day, if you just pop open and say, what's our traffic looking like? We use about 70% of our 2 gig connection that we have now. And this would actually give us the biggest change here from previous, is looking at bringing in 2 gigs just for the high school to use. They're one of the larger sites, and that would really help the rest of the district alleviate when we get that slowdown. It's usually coming from the high school. That would give them plenty for them, and open up the rest for the rest of the school district. And this contract would start July 1 and be effective for 3 years. Questions about internet access or dark fiber between our facilities?
I do have a question. Can you just explain what dark fiber and lit fiber is?
So all fiber is usually dark until you put something on the ends to light it up. So are we paying them for equipment that they'll light it up for, or are we going to put our own equipment in place? That's really the difference. And there's, depending on your size, I think in your larger metropolitan areas, they probably get some better deals with the lit fiber, how they can operate those. For us, dark fiber has been a really nice, we link each building in. We can put 10 gig between buildings if we want. We can do 1 gig. You could go up larger depending on what the switches are that are connecting each site.
Paul, I had a question. Obviously, ValueNet's local and has a lower bid, but do you know why the other bid is so much higher on dark fiber?
Oh, my guess is, so if you look at the WAN rack versus the KS Fiber, those 2 bids, I think what you see is KS FiberNet was essentially eating the cost of implementing a fiber network, and WAN rack was wanting to rely on some state grants to try to put it in at no cost to us. So there's definitely some it wasn't a super straightforward, here's how much you pay and here's what you get. There was some reliances on some other funding sources to get that price down to where they were.
Okay, thanks.
I would like to make a comment about ValueNet. They've been a fantastic provider for us. We had an issue recently on a Saturday. I called the wrong department, and within 15 minutes, they were calling us back. She got to the right person. They got out to maintenance and fixed the fiber issue that had knocked them off on a Saturday morning. That's why we like to give that weight towards local vendors that are great to work with.
Any other questions? Okay, this is an action item.
I move to accept the bid from ValueNet for internet services to Mary Herbert Education Center and Emporia High School, including the dark fiber lease for the 24 to 25, 25, 26, and 26 to 27 school years as submitted.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Please cast your vote.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. And the next item on the agenda is Category 2 E-rate bid for network equipment, licensing, and UPSs.
So when we think about Category 2, that's going to be a lot of the hardware that makes it all work. So when you think dark lit, this is the hardware that's going to help us light that fiber. Most of our equipment, I think when I look at the school district, if you think age, we have about 480 access points around the school district aging 5 to 3 years old, 105 network switches that are between 6 and 3 years old, 2 firewalls that are fairly new, and the licensing to power all of those will expire here in about a year. So primarily when we did this bid with the William L. White bond project and some of the other things going on in the current age of equipment, we were really looking just to renew licensing. We just want to push that out for some additional years. Those same licenses will continue to work down the road when we replace the existing access points with new ones. So it's not like we buy a license and it goes out with the hardware. It'll just roll over with the new hardware as we implement it. A couple new switches as we found needs around the school district. And I think that's kind of where we ended up. So that will eat into some of our remaining E-rate budget when we think about where we're at. Again, the team coming back next year will probably see some more hardware without the licensing to update the older equipment, and that will finish out that E-rate budget year with the cycle they run on, and we'll get a new allotment in 2026. Questions on the E-rate or the option 2?
Any questions? I would take a motion on this item.
I move to approve the bid from SHI for network equipment, licensing, and UPSs as submitted.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Please cast your vote.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Item 7G, reemployment of administrators.
Right. Well, what you have is our list of certified administrators in our district. A change, so we've been on one-year contracts previously, and now we're looking at 2-year for those administrators who have been in their position for 3 years or longer. Something different also is that we are including assistant principals, had input from Dathan Fisher and John Barton, and they were very much in support of that. So this is here for your consideration.
Thank you, Dr. Harder. Are there any questions, feedback? I mean, I definitely think that moving to 2-year contracts is a great move. It shows like our appreciation, and it rewards like hard work.
Absolutely.
Ready?
Ready.
I move to approve the list of administrator contract terms and updated salary packages for administrators and classified exempt as submitted.
We have a motion and a second. Please cast your vote.
Hold on, I think I messed up that motion. It should not have classified exempt on there, just
Wondered. I
administrators.
just read what's on the screen, Casey.
And this, I'm sorry, that was my bad. And the salary packagers are later to be determined.
Okay. I'm
So
like,
let's
there
just
was
do
no salary.
contract terms
I
for
will reread
administrators.
this. I move to approve the list of administrator contract terms for administrators as submitted. Is that what you were looking for? Perfect.
And I would second that.
We have a motion and a second. Please cast your vote.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all of our administrators for all you do for our district. Item 8A, board reports. Leslie, do you have anything from the Flint Hills Technical College Board of Trustees?
I do. I thought, oh gosh, I don't have one of those, but it is still March, and I did have a meeting. We had a really great presentation on our annual audit report. Nice, clean audit, which is what you always want when it comes to the budget, of course. Some great an update and highlights on the Adult Education Center and all the wonderful things it offers to adults in our community. In addition, they've really just upped the interior look of that space. They've done, got some new carpet, they freshened it up, and they do have a really nice like outdoor space that they would love the community to use more. So if anyone's ever looking for a little, like maybe you don't have a yard, or maybe you just need an outdoor place with a fence, and you want to host something, they are always happy to have people host events there. And so they're really trying to do that. We went through a whole bunch of policies like we do here, and that was about it.
Great, thank you. Jeremy, do you have something from the Emporia Recreation Commission?
Yeah, I believe summer hours are in effect, so we close an hour earlier on Monday through Friday, so let your friends know who use the rec. We are still going to need lifeguards, in particular, and staff too, that are umpires, instructors, softball and baseball type positions. So if you know people, especially college students who might be interested in that, please send them our way. The Keisha State Basketball Tournament was held at the William Allen White Auditorium. It was incredible, as always. I got to hand out awards, and it's one of my favorite perks of being an elected official is being able to do stuff like that. And our staff at the rec really does a great job putting that on. Then there was a modification amendment to the MOU that we passed through the rec and hashed out between all the parties to allow any changes to the MOU to be made with a 7-0 vote of the steering committee. That way, if we needed to change a date to submit something, we're not running it through 3 meetings to get it done. And so we took care of that as a board tonight on consent agenda. And that was about it. It was great.
Thank you. Were there any other board reports that we may have missed? Okay, thank you. Next item is 8B, Keisha Election Board of Directors.
So there is one nominee on each of these. So if you'd like to cast your ballot.
Great, so on item 8B, we are electing to the Board of Education representative to Keisha's Board of Directors.
I move to cast a vote for the Board of Education representative to the Keisha Board of Directors as submitted.
We have a motion and a second. Please cast your vote.
Motion passes 7-0.
Item 8C is for the Keisha Election Appeal Board, and each Board of Education in the district and division is entitled to 1 vote for the Board of Education representative to the Keisha Appeal Board. They shall serve a 2-year term beginning July 1st, 2024, and this is an action item.
I move, go for it, Art. Okay, you second. I move to cast a vote for the Board of Education representative to the Keisha Appeal Board as submitted.
We have a motion and a second, and I should state that the nominee for this position is Robin Walls from Columbus. We have a motion and a second. Please cast your vote.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. We are now on item 8D, the Kansas Avenue School Building Proposal to Dispose.
We are very excited to have this on the board agenda. Put lots of information to see the timeline. Part of our timeline was to see if there was a petition to the State Board of Education, if anybody wanted Kansas Avenue, and Casey checked, and there has not been. It has been pretty evident to both Casey and I as we've contacted KSB and KSDE that we're probably going to be the first school district to do this. So we will see how it goes. So if the board approves, you will sign the resolution to dispose, and then the legislature will have the first offer of refusal, and we are ready to send it tomorrow morning if you approve.
That was going to be my question because of the legislative calendar.
Well, we are very aware. And so Dave Cunningham has been very, very helpful. And he said that because I asked him that specific question, that if we were in that timeline, but he said if they did not respond by the end of the legislative session, that would indicate that they did not have a need for it.
Well, I do like Emporia being trailblazers. Are there any questions? Okay, this is an action item.
I move to approve resolution 2024-9 for disposal of the Kansas Avenue School Building as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please cast your vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
The next item on the agenda is item 9A, our strategic plan quarterly update.
Okay, well, this is really what you all have been waiting for. So this is our, if you'll go to strategic report, Casey.
Sorry, I wanted to get
And I'll
them.
invite all of DST up here because everybody has an opportunity here. I know, everybody. And so as Casey's getting that ready, it's a great time just to talk about that all of our staff, all of our teachers, our administrators, oh, you can join too, that everybody has a role to play in all of this. So our priorities and goals that we have right in front of us at all times, this is what we're going to start reviewing. So sometimes it can be a little bit confusing about where we're at as far as giving that report. So this is a way of trying to make it more streamlined and more cohesive as we provide those updates. So our plan is quarterly reports, and you'll see at the end that they are not completely quarterly, but we're also very dependent on when we can provide academic achievement. So we're relying on that information. So everyone will have an opportunity to share some information. You may see the attached PDF that's in there has graphs that you may have seen, but then also graphs that you may not have seen. I will tell you that we did not include everything. It may look like we put absolutely every graph that we had available to us, but we were very specific on what we chose. And then you'll also see in the description that we have every single one, so every board agenda item is tied to our strategic plan or district goals. So, or I'm sorry, the state goals. You will see that every single one of them is on there because we're going to talk about all of them. So we're going to start with student success. Tara?
I am over the moon to start this whole process with you all. So you will probably notice as you listen to our presentation a little bit of a pattern in that a lot of our slides are going to start with our priority, and then it's going to talk about our goal, and then we'll also share. We just really picked out the highlights, so some data highlights, strengths, challenges, and then perhaps a summary or next steps, whatever's appropriate. So you guys will see, the board will see that pattern, okay? So, okay, what I've done is I've kind of picked apart these bullets, and I would like to share with the board what pages they can find that information in the document that Dr. Harder referenced, the very expanded document, if you will. So, looking at our data highlights, so Casey, if we can go back to the slide, sorry about that. That first little tidbit there about kindergarten and first grade, how they outperform their winter testing windows. So I really want you to have a look at this data if you would like to, so you can reference that on table 3, page 3. So I don't know if you guys want, if the board would like me to do that on everything, but I am happy to provide that information because as Dr. Harder said, there are some things that you've seen and some things that you have not seen. So, and if we're going to switch back and forth, that's amazing. I don't know if we should switch back and forth. Okay, okay. Perhaps if the board would like us to focus on anything specific as we share information, we can certainly jump into that expanded document if that would be agreeable. Okay, so back to the slides. So we have a lot of data highlights. Our 8th grade outperformed past winter testing windows on our A reading tests, so that's a highlight. Really, we have highlights all over our grade levels. 15% more of our 9th grade students are no longer at risk on A reading. That can actually be found on the very first page of that expanded document in the first figure. 3 out of our 4 of our grade levels showed improvement on the CBM reading. We also saw similar improvement from our ELL subgroup on that. That information is going to be on page 4, figure 5, page 5, and 6. So 4, 5, and 6. The ELA information is pages 1 through 8. So if you wanted to find any charts or figures about what I'm talking about here, that would be anywhere from 1 through 8. That's where our ELA stuff is. So 5 out of 7 of our grades had more students at low risk and post-secondary ready than past winter windows. So we're really highlighting just that growth that we have seen from all of our grade levels. Our strengths here at the bottom, we have noticed that we really are seeing that consistent implementation of our resource, which is really contributing to what we're seeing here in the growth. Our tier 2 and tier 3 resources are evidence-based. Data talks, I think we've really expanded on our data talks with you. We've shared really the details of what those data talks look like. All of our improvement plans include strategies focused on enhancing our reading instruction, and then our structured literacy lessons from our new ELA resource and our language essentials for teachers of reading and spelling. That letters training is really having a positive impact on our reading and on our achievement. Okay, we can go to the next slide.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
I'm just going up to page 2.
Yes.
To table 1. And I'm curious about what's going on in 9th grade. I saw that in table 1, our winter 24.
I'm going to bring in
Okay.
reinforcements because
Okay.
we knew this might be a question. Thank you.
So she said, tag, Judy, you're it.
Yes. So that shows it's 25 students who are testing low risk.
No, okay. It looks like that.
Yes.
So the first 2 years that we did the FastBridge testing, all 9th graders were tested. We had 10th graders, 11th graders. Last year at the end of the year, the state gave out different direction for our secondary high schools in that all 9th graders are tested. Those students who are not at risk no longer have to be tested. So in the winter, the only students we tested were those that were high risk or some risk in the fall. We also did that for 10th and 11th and 12th grade. So out of those kids that were all at risk in the fall, 15% of them now are not. So they don't have to get tested again. And so essentially that, as we keep going, once they meet the benchmark, they no longer need to be tested. So the high school data is a little messy to be able to share. It's more about, like, let's celebrate these kids finally made it. But it's not a good comparison on the graph. But it's just different apples and oranges. So
That's what it sounds like. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you. All right, so I've been through strengths. Yep, exactly. So we also highlighted some challenges, and this is one that we've talked about quite a little bit in our teaching and learning meetings, that moving target, if you will, on the FastBridge benchmark expectations from fall to winter. Those really are a moving target, so a lot of the times we don't really see that growth that is happening because that, again, those benchmarks are moving targets. So we've talked about that a lot in teaching and learning, as I said. Some districts are editing those benchmarks themselves. We're having discussions just to see what's best for us as a district. So fluency benchmarks are high when compared to other fluency assessments. Our instructional staff have talked about that student stamina. I think we've talked about that in other, that grit, just that desire to just keep going. We've talked about that in other board meetings as well. It's just not as strong for some of those assessments like A reading. The state is working on that approved evidence-based program and practices list. We get updated on that at our district admin meetings where the superintendents get updates. So that is a work in progress as well. It is going to limit the number of resources that we have available to support our students at risk. So that's something that we're also working on as a district team. Yes. Yeah.
I wanted to, sorry, I was kind of excited about some of this data, and I wanted to share a little bit piece to you. The first two bullets talk about how the benchmark from fall to winter changes significantly. When we had our data discussions this winter with the buildings, it was very disheartening, honestly, because we didn't see the growth that we felt like our kids that were low risk and high risk. The kids that were low risk and post-secondary ready, it wasn't more than it was in the fall. So we felt a little bit disheartened. But then we pulled the data and went winter to winter. And if you look winter to winter, we made great gains. So it's almost one of those points to make. Those benchmarks are a little wonky. It's a little easier to meet that fall benchmark than it is that winter benchmark. So if you go winter to winter, we actually have more kids meeting the winter benchmark this year than we have in the past, except for 2 grade levels. And at one of those grade levels, 3rd grade, if you look at where 3rd grade is now, it's lower than last year's winter benchmark, significantly higher than where they were at as 2nd graders. So even our cohorts are going up. So I just wanted to point that out to you, that it's really exciting. You have to look at the data different ways. Fall to winter doesn't look great. Winter to winter does. So that middle benchmark really is, it's difficult to meet. But we actually are making growth in that. So I just want to point that out.
Thank you. She's so good at that. So that last point there that I really do want to touch on, the challenges, would be that updated data, March 20th, 2024, 29.6% of students K through 12 are chronically absent. And we've talked about that before. If you would like to look at more of that data, we have a full chart or table, if you will, on chronic absenteeism, and that is on page 62. That's the last page of your expanded information there. It's Appendix 1. So that is not just an Emporia problem, that is an everywhere problem. So we are working to try to figure out how we can get more students to school more consistently. So that is definitely one of our challenges that we face. Next steps, we're going to continue to refine those data discussions. I think we've shared that with you. Those are they're just evolving. We dig deeper every time, and we identify different ways to look at data. So we're excited to continue with our data talks. Evaluate our future needs for continued implementation and growth of our ELA resource. That's definitely things that we're talking about. Continuing to progress our efforts on updating and refining our curriculum guides. A lot of that work happens in the summer, but it also happens throughout the school year. And then identifying district-wide common assessments. We have talked about that in multiple groups of our staff members, and that definitely is still something that we need to discuss and implement when we're able to. I think that's all I have.
Hi, everybody. Appreciate you letting us be here tonight. Thanks. This is a really exciting report. There's some great data in that 62-page document. Some things that we're doing differently, like you'll see the cohort data in there. You'll see ELL data in there. You'll see a lot of different things that we're just beginning to talk about. So I get to talk a little bit about math and our goals in preschool. So when we look at our math data, our kids are making progress winter to winter. We're doing better every single year. It's little, but we are doing better, and there are some grades. I believe it's 8th grade, and this data is on figure 7, page 9, but I think 8th grade really showed a big improvement this year, which is really good. In our ELL population, we're also seeing some good growth there as well, and that document is on page, that information is figure 8 on page 10. One thing that really excites me is starting to look at more cohort data, seeing how the kids are doing from year to year, that apples to apples type of a comparison. And you'll see more of that if you kind of peruse that big document. You'll see some state assessment data in there that's done by cohort. That'll probably come up later on when we talk about state assessment data. That's kind of interesting also, because you can really see the change in some grades in that level 1 and how we're reducing it, which is important. And that's actually And then we actually have some cohort data, kind of like with Mrs. Stanley and Mrs. Glaze talked about that, a reading cohort data. We have some math data, which is figure B7 on page 48, shows some similar growth in how we're doing with our cohort. So it's really exciting getting to look at that cohort data because you're really starting to look at kids year to year, which is important. The problem is we cross over some grade boundaries from primary to secondary, so it gets a little bit messy there. But still, it's really good data to see, kind of see how those kids are growing. Some strengths that we need to take into account is, as you know, this is our second year for the math resource, and which I think is really helping us be more consistent. We're seeing better teaching practices throughout the district consistently. And our teachers are also reporting and feeling more comfortable. That first year, I think they was pretty uncomfortable doing something new, and I think they're feeling better about it. I think we're seeing a lot of the same things that Ms. Glaze talked about with reading. We're going to see some of the same things in reading as we do in math. Fact fluency tends to be a problem, and we're addressing that in our instructional components across the district, even at the high school level. We mentioned Tier 2 and Tier 3 in the evidence-based list. We've been doing evidence-based information for a number of years. So that's something that Emporia does really well. So we're looking at that list. And we got some work to do in terms of some of the things that were removed, trying to get it back on with the appeal process. And then, like Mrs. Glaze talked about, our data talks, I think, are big and important. Doing those in the district. We're beginning to do those at all the grade levels now. And they're really tied to school improvement. We talk about the data. We talk about what they're going to do to improve their data based on school improvement plans. So I think that's a really important component. So then some challenges. As with reading, the expectations from term to term, fall to winter, winter to spring, those benchmark expectations are hard. There's a lot of growth needs to happen. And sometimes it's hard for our kids to make those expectations with our learning gaps. We've talked about math in terms of our skill deficit several times, so that is really hard to continue to do, particularly when you have huge gaps of skills within classes. Teachers have such a wide variety of kids, skill gaps, and it's hard to address all the needs in the schools at the same time. Again, fact fluency is important. We need to keep working on that. And the chronic absenteeism that showed up again in this one, and that's on that last page. You can kind of, if you look at that chart, you can kind of see how we are doing better. But we have a long ways to go to get back to where we were. Kids are coming back to school, but if they're not at school, they're losing opportunities to practice. And I was thinking about that today when I was doing a walk. And really, if a kid's chronically absent, that's about 17 days for us. And we have about 17 days. We have about 40 weeks in the school. That's missing 1 day of school every 10. And like I mentioned to you before, we have a lot of kids who are there about 85% of the time, so which means they miss about 20 days. So that's even more. That's about that's almost 1.5 times, that's almost 1.5 days every 10 days that they're gone, which they're losing out on instructional time. So we really need to get our kids in school and try to reduce that chronic absenteeism rate. Some of our next steps, we're continuing to work on data discussions. It's really exciting doing those data discussions and getting to see them at the elementaries all the way through high school now. It's really exciting. I think there has some benefit there. And including instructional coaches, because they really know what's going on. And we also, you'll see there, we've begun to include the building accreditation shares. They're the ones that work with school improvement at each building. So that's important because that's that link between the data and the school improvement plans. Then we're going to continue to work on our math resources, continue to grow that and learn more about that. We continue to work on our curriculum guides and that center's alignment, and then working on our common assessments and getting that local data to show growth. Okay, that's all I got. Thank you.
And I have the opportunity to talk about social emotional development. So some of the highlights for this, you can see figure 9 and table 9 on page 13. You can see a chart that shows the discipline logs by month. And really this it does show a little bit of an increase, and then we have a pretty big decrease, and then it kind of goes up and down a little bit. But if you are in a school setting, you know that there are peaks and valleys to discipline and behavior sometimes in school settings, and especially at the elementary level. And I talked a little bit about this during the effective services presentation just a couple weeks ago, that you will see, especially at the elementary level, that at the beginning of the year, there are more behaviors because that's when they're are newly in a school setting. They are getting used to that school setting. So our hope is that with time and that accessibility to school, that decreases. You can also see that it decreases at the secondary level as well, and we want to see that. So again, students have that summertime where they're a little bit laxed maybe, and they're just maybe forgetting those school rules or the expectations. They get back to school, and then they have those expectations back, and they get used to that. So that is our hope that we see. We did realize, and we're going to talk about that a little bit in the challenges, that we do need to be mindful of those spikes and really make sure that our teachers and administrators are geared up and ready for those times of the year. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. The other thing, the number of incidences at the beginning of the year, like I said, are more frequent, but you can see that there are times where they're less frequent as well. So we really want to just be mindful of those pieces. Some of our strengths in the spring of 2023, there was more specialized training for administrators and teachers. That has only continued with some of the work that we've done with Jennifer Casey and some things that we have embedded in for learning for our student support specialists as well, and really making sure that our group of administrators and professionals that work with our students with behaviors feel like they're supported and then can go and support the classrooms and the teachers in the classrooms. The use of Capturing Kids' Hearts district-wide, and we have more that's coming, and that's so exciting, and things that have been approved by you all as the board, making sure that we are continuing that focus, and it's not just in pockets of places, it's that district-wide pre-K through 12 approach, going all the way from classified to certified staff. We also have all schools logging entries into PowerSchool more consistently. So on Appendix F, you can see the elementary. We did this work over the summer. I was fresh in the district then. I remember that meeting with the SSSs and the elementary principals, really fine-tuning what those district-wide definitions of behavior are. So you can see just some of those pieces. That will continue as we fine-tune those things and work on that. And then you can see our challenges. We, as a district, we are gaining confidence, but with that gaining confidence, it is learning, and learning takes time, and we want to make sure that we are giving our teachers those tools in the tool belt, but then are being mindful of kind of those nuggets of things that we need to give teachers. We can't give them things too fast. We can't offer too much at one time because then they just need that time to digest that information. That's also for the students too. We want to make sure that the teachers are really being mindful of what they're embedding and putting into practice in the classroom. Ongoing professional development for incoming teachers and the current staff, we want to make sure that we have a process and a plan for that. So again, for the Capturing Kids' Hearts, we know that we need to make sure that we are having that as a PD that all teachers have, new teachers have, and then the other PD as well. There has been an increase in behaviors at different times of the year that I mentioned, so we will be mindful of that and use that data tracking to make sure that we're aware of when those are. And then, especially at the elementary level, make sure that our SSSs can push in with some of those kind of tips and tricks for teachers and see where they are needed to support those behaviors that come up. And then as far as the chronic absenteeism piece, that can result in the feeling of isolation, of that disconnectedness of school community. So again, just making sure that we are being mindful and open to what our students need from us to make sure that they know that school is a place that they need to be and they want to be. As far as next steps, financial resources have been dedicated to provide our behavior specialists, which was approved tonight. We appreciate that, and we are very excited to have that new position in the district starting in July, so that's exciting. Professional development sessions will be provided to support our staff and students. We're already working on CKH pieces and other PD that we can do. We've talked to some folks about what we need to offer and how we can do that and the times of the year that we can do that for teachers. And then that reporting of discipline data in Power School. We know that it's gotten better, but we know that we can do even better, and we can fine tune that a little bit more as far as being mindful again of what we're logging and how we are logging that.
I have a question about the log, if that's okay.
Yes.
Okay, so I was just wondering, I guess it's kind of a two-part question. So in between January and February, there was an increase in the amount of behaviors in the discipline logs. So I was wondering about the increase, but I was also wondering about from December to February, like if you take out the increase in January, it's still about a 50% drop. So the question is, what do you think attributed to the increase and the decrease? And like, is that an outlier of kids coming off of winter break? Can you expand on that?
So we looked at last year too, and it's hard. It's kind of the apples oranges because we are being such more mindful of getting our incidences logged into Power School. So we don't know for sure. And then I've been working with the SSS team at the elementary level especially to see if they know exactly why we have those peaks and what those are. So I don't have any answers for you tonight, but we can definitely, we can dig into that and get more information.
I was kind of looking at that too, Lillian, and I wondered, I just wrote it down. There were 8 less school days in the 214 to 315 spot. So, I mean, there's going to be less behaviors. I wonder if it would be helpful to see like a daily average, maybe sometime in the future, or even a weekly average, as opposed to, that factors in how many actual school days there were. That I think that would be interesting to see, because you're right, it is a pretty big decrease.
Right, and same with the winter break, like December 15th to February 14th, winter break is a big chunk of that, but it's still like, I think it's interesting, like 50 to 18 is more than a 50% decrease. So, because if they're doing something that's working, I would love to keep doing that.
Exactly. Yes.
Well, I'm going to add.
Yes.
So we were just kind of talking back there. So Jennifer Casey, who we hired tonight, she was here in December and then also again in January. So we were talking very specifically about what could be done in each building, and and this was elementary. She was working very specifically because buildings had similar needs, but then there was just some nuances here and there. So we did implement some different, like, alternative types of classrooms that for our students that had some really significant behavior. So we saw some improvement there.
I'll be talking about some of the engagement and communication opportunities and kind of the way some of the highlights of that have worked over the past quarter. Kind of looking at, first of all, some of the highlights or the strengths was just the climate survey. As you'll remember, back on February 7th, Dr. Thompson came in and went through that climate survey. And being able to do that climate survey, this was the first climate survey we had done since 2018. And so the highlights of that were very eye-opening, and being able to see exactly what the community was saying, what our stakeholders were saying about the district, and what some of those strengths are. So just kind of highlighting that, and that will refer back to Table 14 in that quarterly update with the climate survey. But the results of that climate survey were showing, when parents have concerns or patrons have concerns, they reach out to our schools. And so I think that's, a positive aspect, and one of the things that the climate survey did show. And then that the parents are feeling welcome to our schools. We went through that transition with COVID where, parents and guests weren't in the schools. And so being able to transition back out of that, also very much a highlight from that climate survey. And then just the active parent and teacher organizations that we have, especially in our elementary schools, the way those are working, and what has transpired through COVID, and being able to have parents, students gathering and having activities, having events are all positive. And those are things that we were seeing from that climate survey. And like I said, we hadn't done that since 2018. And so being able to review that, those practices, and being able to increase those engagement opportunities is something that we're definitely working on and continue to do. some of the challenges that were prominent through the climate survey, and what that shared was just getting parents actively engaged, in our days. And part of that will be, as we have more opportunities, more engagement opportunities, to increase that. And then just also getting stakeholders to complete that survey. We hadn't done one for several years, and so, we had, over 1,200 people engage in that survey, but getting them to complete that, and whether that's, maybe that's making it shorter, maybe more tuning some of those questions in there. But those were some of the things that we, saw because of those results and from that. And the challenges will be addressed by, working into the increased number of those opportunities. And so, parents, caregivers, getting those families in our district, this just last night we did the kindergarten welcome tours. And so having families being able to be in our schools and do those things and provide those engagement opportunities. And you can see some additional information from that, and that's on Appendix G, which covers through the district communication plan. And so you can go through there and you can kind of see a little bit more, and I'll talk just a little bit more about that here in just a minute. And then the summary on the inclusive culture is just the table that we looked at in 14. This is in that report as well. Just performing well with the stakeholders, the positive outcomes of the climate survey, and assessing the effectiveness of our two-way communication. All the different things that we're doing through communicating, whether it's with the buildings, through the district, looking through those and supporting those opportunities to be transparent, and then having that open communication with our families as well. The next one that I'll talk a little bit about is just growing those relationships and engagement. And you can see, I did go ahead and include a couple of the charts there, just that social media reach. We went through a year where we didn't have a person in that position, and you look at our engagements, which was just over 42,000, within the same time period this year, and having that position, over 800,000 engagements. I mean, we should touch 1 million engagements with all of our stakeholders. Now, we do realize that's not reaching everybody. I mean, social media and the Instagram and the YouTube and Facebook, those kinds of things, but it is reaching our families, and we're getting a lot of response and a lot of engagement through those things. Like I said, should hit 1 million by the time of the end of the school year, and so that's exciting to have that. And also, it's not included in this, but in Figure 13, it also shows just who's in Facebook, age-wise, gender-wise, and so to be able to reach out and to be able to pare those down and look at additional opportunities to reach those that aren't in that particular category. And so I think that's exciting. Like I said, and that was in Figure 13 in that report. Also, just talking a little bit, just the successes of those, reaching as many people as we possibly can through those communication channels, accessibility and family engagements, and that's whether it's through the website, and that was something new that we did last year, just a wide range of evolving needs, being able to work through those and being able to see, what our families need, and being able to answer those through those different channels. I did talk just a little bit about the Appendix G, that district communication plan. That's something we put together last November, December, and just all of the engagement opportunities that are through there. And that's, shows some of our successes as well. Some of the challenges that we see from that is still reaching all of our families. There's that demographic, or there's that group that are challenging to reach. Our Hispanic population is, right around that 50% mark, and engaging all of those families. And so continuing to, fight those challenges and see what we can do to reach all of those families as well. Just kind of reviewing the next steps, communication. Just the strength and growth in the communication and the information that we provide through those social media channels, and increasing those, just proving the highly effective that we need to recognize that ever-changing landscape of communication, stay on top of those things, and see what things that we can do to be able to continue that and to improve upon those things. When you have a chance, I would encourage you to take a look at that Appendix G, which is that district communication plan. It aligns everything through our strategic plan, and then outlines all of the objectives as well. And so all the different things that we're doing, the goals all align with the district priorities. And there's 35 different tactics that are in through there that shows all of the different communication tools and all the different things that we use. And so taking a look at that and just showing as we can continue to improve and use those next steps through all of our communication channels. Thank you.
So the next section you'll see is really on recruiting and retaining skilled staff, and then looking at our competitive compensation and benefits as well. So there's a little bit of area that bleeds over into Mrs. Stranathan and business, so she's going to speak to a couple of these items here with us. So this particular chart really just outlines a report that we have to fill out in the fall and in the spring for our open vacancies certified-wise. In the spring here, you'll see that the top number, 40 total openings as far as teacher openings. That may seem a little alarming, but if you look down just a little bit, you can see 17 of those were in regular ed and 23 in special ed. But the next line shows that we actually filled 26 of those 40 positions with substitutes or by buying plan time. Some of our January hires were able to start to fill some of those open positions. That left 9 remaining in the regular ed side and then 5 in special education. And then of those at the bottom, 6 of those 9 remaining openings we filled for 24-25. And then on the other side, 2 of the 5 remaining openings in special education we've filled for next year. So it's exciting to see that. We're in a little bit better place now than we were a couple of years ago, and we'll talk a little bit more of that as we go along here. So the next slide really just points out some of our classified staff openings. In the past, the number of openings in several of these areas has been in the double digits, so it's exciting to see just single-digit numbers there. We've got some new directors in place. They've really worked hard, as well as our administrators, in finding staff, even though there are staffing shortages, and not just here, but everywhere. Many of the groups I meet with are always talking about their agency still looking to fill specific positions. So it's good to see those numbers going down. Food service at none when we did this report, that was amazing. So we're glad to see that. So the next slide really talks about the strengths. I'm not going to read all of these to you. But we've worked really hard since last fall and into this spring in getting hiring underway for next school year. We hired several people in the fall who were either able to start in January or were finishing block 3 actually this semester. So the competition for teachers right now is intense, and many people are hiring earlier and earlier every year. Mr. Brooks and Mr. Nicolette here took over leading the custodians this year, right in the middle of the year, so that's been a big task for them, but they've really worked hard to fill the open positions that they have there. I think they have 1 floater position and a part-time position that they're down to right now, so they've been working really hard to staff those. You can see our paraprofessional numbers are higher than they have been. Food service, transportation are in a better spot than they have been. I emailed all of them right before spring break and said, hey, where are you at? And even though they're still trying to fill all of their positions, I think they all felt a little bit better about where they are currently. The next 2, I think, Pam, if you want to take those.
Yeah, talking a little bit about our benefits with our broker. It's exciting to have a broker on board. We just got release for them to get into our Blue Cross and Blue Shield to be able to look at that. There's some things we have to fill out because that's information about our staff. And so they're getting in, they're going to start digging into that. The next step we will have is with our committee. They had a great idea we were trying to figure out how to get our health committee, our insurance committee together, because remember we talked about breaking those up so people could serve on the advisory group out of that in reference to the dental and the vision, and then to the health, and then bring them back together. They had a great idea to do a Teams meeting so that it didn't force people to have to physically come here. They could go home. We can do it to where people can break out into groups. If they wanted to float back and forth, they could between groups and then come back as a large group and not have to have multiple meetings and try to do that and to expedite. Thought it was a great idea to be able to serve our staff that would be serving on that. So I'm excited about that next steps and to move forward. I'm very positive. I'm hoping we will have numbers early enough, like we talked about, into getting that into our negotiations, and by June at the latest. I would like to see it by the end of May. They said that they would have the potential to move that direction. So continuing to offer that benefit and to be competitive in that, so that we do not lose staff because they want to leave because of our benefits. So, all right, go back.
Did you want to speak to the salary first? That bullet there in the next one, or I can speak to it.
Okay, I'll let you speak to that one, so.
Just didn't want to bleed over into the,
No, you're fine.
business section, but very proud of the fact that we were able to add a couple of years ago $1,500 to the teacher base, and then last year $1,000. Again, hoping to bring that to negotiations. And then the classified salary schedule, even though that was a while ago, I think that ultimately has helped us fill some of those classified positions that we have had open in the past. So it was good to get that base up to $15 an hour. Our summer job fairs at the mall, we've had those the last couple of summers. We haven't picked up a tremendous number of people, but I know there have been connections in a couple of the departments that have ultimately ended up to hiring. So we feel like we need to continue that, even if it just picks up a couple of people here and there. We're working to return our strategists. In talking to all of those that were displaced, I think we've mentioned this before, there were really only 3 that wanted to go back into that role. Many were kind of happy. We're still kind of in that unknown area here at the end of the year, but we've actually placed those 3, and then looking at the 3 remaining buildings at the elementary level, we've got some ideas for people there so that every building will have 2 strategists at least back in their building. So we're working really hard to fill open positions as they come open right now, and I think we're in a pretty good spot. So as far as challenges, the alternate licensure route has been a tremendous challenge. Every university, it seems like, is creating not just one but multiple routes to becoming a teacher, which is awesome. It helps us fill some of the gaps that we've got. But it's also difficult to support those people because many of them don't have a lot of classroom experience. So they need really just a different level of support than what someone who would go through a traditional teaching program would have. But I know Teaching and Learning is doing a little bit more in the summer this year with some of those folks before they actually start with new teachers. So they're going to get a heavy dose of things before they actually start with teacher professional learning. So they'll hit the ground running, hopefully, with everything that we're providing. I mentioned this, teacher candidates are being hired much earlier. I reached out to a candidate today who doesn't graduate until December for a job in 2025. I just want to make sure that we're making every effort to reach out to those folks and let them know that we're interested. I haven't even seen an application for this person, so hopefully just those little reach outs like that will get some candidates flowing our way. Societal factors is another challenge. Many years ago, people took a job and they stuck with it for 30 years, 40 years, and that's just not the case anymore. People just aren't afraid to move jobs as much as they used to be. So in summary, again, I feel like overall we're in a better place as far as hiring than the last couple of years in both classified and certified. Our folks have been working really hard to get those positions filled, and I think we've got a lot of great things in place to help keep them. And then obviously the broker and the insurance rates is another good thing for our staff members. The next section is on safe and secure learning environments and what we're doing there. So these results here are from a survey I gave to our new Safety and Security Committee this year. It was at the very beginning of the year, and the survey really was to identify the positive supports that we feel like we have in place, and then some of the risk factors that they felt like they were there. So I'm not going to read all of those, but there's some great things on there. The bottom of the positive supports, the effective student-teacher relationships, I think a lot of that goes to the capturing kids' hearts, as was spoken about earlier. And I think you all have seen and heard a lot about that. The extracurricular programs, the sports, the PD for staff, the crisis plans that we have in place. There's a laundry list of things that our committee felt like we really had a good, strong foothold on. Some risk factors that they identified were just high mobility. We do see some of that still. Truancy, the chronic absenteeism, and then poverty were the top 3 that came out there. As far as strengths, our new safety committee is really built of folks from a lot of different parts of our district, from administrators to secretaries to custodians we've just got a multitude of people on there. So they bring an array of experiences and perspectives to what we're trying to do. We'll be adding some additional sections to our emergency operations plan. Our relocation plans were updated in each building. Those will be included in the detailed plan. And some updates to our other buildings specific security documents were made. I know Jen Arndt, we've spoken about this several times, but the cardiac emergency response plan and then our MERT teams, we're excited. I think we may have actually a couple of legislators coming in April 2nd and 3rd as we're doing some of these drills for Project Adam, who want to kind of see what the experience is like. As we've done construction, we've added new cameras and security features with some of those things. We have new phone capabilities in the buildings, and then I know Paul's been working with Lyon County Emergency Communications on a mapping project, which will get someone inside of a building to a more pinpoint location than just the front door. So I'm excited to see that roll out, and hopefully that'll help them should they ever have to come to our buildings. Challenges on the next slide. Really, after Todd Ayer left us at the high school, we've had a difficult time finding somebody, and as you know, those are folks are few and far between. Appreciate Willie and Larry and the sacrifices they've made to cover all of the elementary schools and the high school. They've been running all over each week to touch base with those different schools. I think just the idea of keeping up safety and security with the number of societal factors that play into things, there's a lot that goes on to it. It's ever evolving in the kinds of things that we're dealing with. There's not one process or one product that can take care of everything. So just navigating all of those things, we continue to work internally on our processes and looking for the things that might help us meet those needs in the best fashion. And then the last item there was just predicting unpredictable behavior. That's the toughest part about all of this in society as general. Feel good about the work our committee has done to this point. Safety and security in our district is always our top priority. I feel like we're getting a lot of training scenarios out in front of folks. At each of our meetings, we're talking about tabletop exercises. Just read another one yesterday. But we're going to continue working with our community partners. I sent on a couple of community groups that this is the focus. Whether it's health, whether it's cybersecurity, the sky's the limit on the things that we talk about. In fact, next week we have a drill on an anhydrous ammonia spill that's going to involve many aspects of our community. People coming together just to talk through what their response is as an agency to something like that should it happen. So a little bit about safety and security.
All right, I get our final goal and priority, and it relates to our professional development and instructional resources. So on this table, you see some of our highlights for what we've done. This is by no means all of our professional development for the year or the resources. If you want to see an entire list, and I'm sure that isn't even the entire list because we are constantly looking at these things, but page 25 through 29 has that list of our other document. You can see their current emphases, and you know about those. We've been talking about those throughout the year, and you've been very generous in how we use our funds. There's that commitment to the funds. But I wanted to also kind of focus on those next steps. When we're looking at professional development, we're really excited about the Capturing Kids' Hearts next year and that positive impact that it's had on our staff and students. We're going to get started with that sheltered instruction observation protocol, that instructional practice that will best help and support our students who have English as a second language. In June, the 30 certified staff members who are going to be our train the trainer go through their training, and so then we'll start mapping out how that rolls out into the buildings. We are, with the addition of Jennifer Casey as our behavior specialist, she's going to be able to provide more training and support to the buildings, and that is amazing. She's already given us a lot of great tips and strategies to use just in the couple of days she spent with the elementary principals. And then our other highlight for next year is our Professional Development Council, PDC, is working on creating a USD253 mini conference for our certified staff. So taking a half day or a whole PLT day and designing it around the needs that our certified staff say they have for professional development. We just did a needs assessment. We are going to analyze it, basically create sessions and have our own experts provide the leadership to those sessions. So the PDC is pretty excited about that opportunity for next year. As we look at resources, science will be our focus for resource adoption. We will continue to align and secure Tier 2 and Tier 3 intervention resources that are on that evidence-based programs and practices list. That's going to be difficult. A lot of our interventions that we are showing growth with are now no longer on the approved list. We are going to go through a process to request that those be approved for us. The state is graciously allowing that. They've already sent out what that looks like. And as long as we have the data, the research, the evidence that says it's working with our population, then we're going to be allowed to use it. Many of those things KSDE emphasized were not approved simply because they didn't meet one of the categories, one of those being peer review. So KSDE isn't saying they aren't great resources, they just didn't meet all the categories that they had to use, that they were directed to use as they evaluated them. So we'll be working on that. We have our behavior specialist and just increasing that number of strategies to help support behaviors, particularly at elementary. All right, so when we look at our strengths, I think one of the biggest strengths we have here in Emporia is that commitment for quality time for professional development. And that's always been important to us, and we continue to make that a priority. All of our resources that we have purchased are evidence-based, whether it's Tier 1, Tier 2, or Tier 3. The CKH and its positive impact, those data discussions and are really focused on the school improvement plan in relation to what professional development is needed for the individual buildings or resources. We're really able to more differentiate the way we've done the data discussions lately. Curriculum guides are being updated or developed. In the past, the 4 content areas were given time to create and develop their curriculum guides, but not the others. And so one of those pieces, as a school district, a parent has the right at any time to ask to see their curriculum, to ask to see those resources. And so we've spent the last couple of years, the teachers have spent the last couple of years developing, creating, fine-tuning those curriculum guides, and our hope is to have those on the website in a parent portal this summer so that people can see those. Our PSYOP training is about ready to begin, and our behavior specialist is added. So those are our strengths. Challenges that we have. The number of state mandated training that we have to do at the very beginning of the year often makes it difficult to get in all of our building or district professional development based on our needs. The understanding of our certified staff in why certain professional development has been chosen by a building administrator, instructional coach, that relevancy. Sometimes teachers don't see that, why I don't need this and why is this important. So being able to really clearly communicate and share with staff why those items were chosen or selected. Attendance on professional learning days, that can be an issue at times. Sometimes we have a large amount of staff that are calling in sick or having doctor's appointments. So, when we're missing a professional learning day that's 5 or 6 hours, a lot of new learning is happening, and all staff is expected to implement that learning. If you aren't there for it, it makes it very difficult for you to carry out the initiatives and the priorities for the district and for your teams. The continued rising cost of resources, that, as well as everything that we have, increases in cost. And then just making sure, how do we maintain that teacher choice when it comes to resources and instruction, as well as that commitment to that consistency across the district and what we want to make sure every kid has access to. So, one of the things we will continue to do as we look at, summarize all of this, is when we continue to evaluate resources in professional development, which is ongoing, those decisions are made with the input from certified staff, administrators, and always looking at what has the evidence behind it.
So that is our summary of our first report. And so you'll have upcoming reports in July, October, December. And like I said, it's not going to be perfect quarters, but that's where it falls as far as data. So what questions do you have? And then we'll be, just as you have time to process it, would love feedback to how we can improve this process and reporting. So it's a lot of information.
Going back to something Judy just said, if they miss that PLT day because they have a doctor's appointment or they're sick or whatever, do they not have to make that up?
You've used chargeable leave, so we can't make them make the time up. It's because then it would be all of a sudden we're outside of their contracted time. So the expectation, what they've been told, is that they need to get the information. So they're not going to get the equivalent of the same level of PD, but they have the responsibility to seek out a colleague, go to an instructional coach, the principal, to get the information.
Gotcha.
So they have it, but it's not the same level and depth.
Okay, thank you.
That is interesting. I conduct an annual team training day at work, which this year was our first year kind of doing like our own mini conference, and it went really, really well. Best one we've ever had. But if you miss it, like you have to do online training, and there's no getting out of that. So that's interesting. But it is banking, not school. I'm really glad you focused on the chronic absenteeism. Jamie and Art and I had the chance to attend a little, what would you call it? An event, a conference, a forum on Monday with the Kansas Hispanic and Latino American Commission. Thank you. And we talked a lot about chronic absenteeism and how some of our families come from countries where that's not something, truancy is not a thing. Like you can miss school as much as you want, and it's just okay. So thinking of ways that we can address that, and not just in our Hispanic community, obviously. And I know that Sarah Henning's working really hard to reach out to families and make sure they know, and all of our attendance secretaries and everybody's really, and it sounds like most of them are bilingual, and they're really just trying hard. But what other things are we considering? I know, like Roxana even shared a story, and a para from Riverside shared that sometimes people will even go pick kids up if they can to bring them to school. So I know we're trying. I just wonder what other things we might have in the pipeline.
Well, I want to point out too, you'll see chronic absenteeism was also including in social emotional. It wasn't just academic, because that's also learning as well. Talking to other schools, relationships are really important. If a student knows that he or she's going to be missed and it's important for them to be there, that's really important. I know Ryan has looked at some data, and so there is I think after, if you want to talk just a little bit about that, just where it kind of drops off. Every day is important, and like Ryan explained, when you start looking at how many cumulative days, I mean, that's so much learning. And we've also looked at, and KSD was really instrumental in that, how many days that you miss as a kindergartner, and then how many days you miss as a first grader. That is so impactful for that foundational learning.
Yeah. And some of that, Dr. Harder talked about the elementaries. Some of that isn't on the kids. It's the parents getting them there. So we got to change that culture too, to get the parents to understand that it's important to bring their kids to school. So I've been working with our chronic absenteeism data, looking in multiple ways. The chart you got in this book was so you kind of see a trend, where we were and where we are now. We are trending down, and we're getting better, but we really need to work on, like you said, strategies, figuring out what's going to get the kids to school. At the high school level, making sure they have a good person that they can go to talk to, have that partner, or it's like a teacher who believes in them, wants them to be there, greets them. It all goes back to capturing kids' hearts. I think that's going to help. Now that we're doing that pre-K-12, that's going to be a big piece. I think it's going to help kids understand their belonging in school. I've been working a little bit on chronic absenteeism in terms of kids' grades, and kind of seeing, does chronic absenteeism have a lot of impact on grades? When we think about our kids that are passing and failing, there is a difference. The kids that pass tend to be at school more, but the kids that are failing, they're still coming to school. They're just not coming to school at the same level the kids that are passing all their classes. I did some research, and I talked to Mr. Fisher, and I looked at some kids who are failing a lot of classes, and even the kids who are failing a lot of classes are still coming to school regularly. Some of them aren't even chronically absent. They're still coming to school every day. They're just not being successful in the classroom. It's not a lot of those, but there are enough that I called Mr. Fisher and said, hey, do you know these kids? Are they on your radar? And he did. I mean, he knows a lot of his kids out there, but really trying to dig into that and trying to figure out, is there a connection? Is there other data we need to look at? Can we correlate that chronic absenteeism to anything else? It's just difficult to know what's going to bring a kid to school. And I think going back to what Ms. Stanley's talked about and Dr. Mickelson, the capturing kids' hearts, I think, is that relationship, having every kid having an adult that believes in them, wants them to be there. They're greeting them in school, being outside their classroom, shaking their hands as they come in, saying, I want you to be here, I'm glad you're here. I think it goes a long ways to get kids here, but also that peer relationships too. Kids belonging to different groups, having the clubs and things like that, wanting to come to school, be part of a club, being part of athletics, those after-school programs, things like that. Because if they're not passing their classes, they can't do sports. It's just hard to do that. So they've got to pass their class. They got to come to school. But just figuring out what's going to get them there, I think, is something we need to do a little more research on. Does that help? Like I said, we don't have the answers, but we are getting better. It's just a slow process. I think we're going to get there, and I think Captain Guitar is going to help. So, thank you.
You know, a little bit more too. Principals are being creative. So at Walnut and at William Allen White, they're doing things like families or camps. And so really getting students that are K through 5 in different groups. So then teachers get to know them and students get to know each other. So it's just a little different way of looking at things. So they get to know students not only in their grade level, but across the school. What other questions?
I like the, you mentioned data talks a lot, or data discussions, and I think that's important. And I know at the KSB conference, I've been in sessions where they talked about, really digging into that data, trying to understand it. And maybe that first year or two, you don't understand what these numbers mean. And like you said, we're digging in, and we're trying to figure out, we tried this strategy, wasn't effective, so now we're looking even closer to see who are these kids that are chronically absent. Are they failing, or do we have chronically absent kids that are actually successful? And how does that work, And so I really like to hear that continued data discussion and really gleaning insight from everybody in that group that has maybe a different perspective that, hey, well, we can try this, or we can try this, and just keep digging at that to see if we can make some headway.
And we do a really great job with data talks, data discussions, and we had a KSDE rep talking with DLT last Thursday just to getting input about what we do on school improvement and accreditation. And so that was something she seemed impressed, that we do that at building levels and then across the district, so there's multiple levels. We also know that we have a need to calibrate across the district. So there's definite improvements we can make. We have some teams that do a really great job and really dig in, and other teams that maybe need a little bit more guidance in that.
I have a couple of questions. First of all, though, I love this report. This is everything I wanted it to be. Okay, I want to go back, though, to Leslie's question because, so we've talked about chronic absenteeism, but what about truancy, and what happens when a building realizes that they have a student who is becoming truant?
Sure. I mean, it has been a challenge. How about that? So it's been a challenge. So if, Jared, did you want to say something?
I don't know if they have the same process at the high school that they did when I was out there, but our attendance folks, our discipline folks would run reports frequently, and we would look at them. If students were getting to the point where it looked like they were going to go into truancy, we sent letters, we contacted parents, we had a meeting with the student just to talk to them. Sometimes it was effective. Sometimes we would get counselors in and kind of tag team, but a lot of it just is situational. It depends on if they're working at night and they can't get up in the morning, or they didn't get off until 6. There's just so many different things. But that was one thing we did at the high school that really helped us try to be proactive with some of the data.
Talked to Mark Goodwin earlier this year, last year, and so he helped us see that there were some, so on the absentee, that just how they were getting the reports at the courthouse, they were very difficult to read. So we've been trying to improve that, but sometimes that's where it gets difficult. We do or we try to do as many of the interventions and the soft sell to get them to school as possible, but then there's also that piece where if we can't get students to school and we're worried about being safe, there is that other piece of that. Mm-hmm. And I know they get backlogged.
Yeah. Is it okay if I have a couple more? Okay.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to step on anyone's toes. Okay, so I'm so glad that you brought up student testing stamina, and because we're in the midst of state testing, and just earlier today, I was talking to some of my students about not just clicking through and getting done in 10 minutes. What are some strategies that you all are working on improving that stamina and preventing students from just clicking through?
That was a big topic at our data discussions this winter. And one of the things we talked about was just practicing it. You know, just sitting there and reading 20 minutes. They don't have the energy to do that. With the new ELA resource, the reading is difficult, and so teachers are reading the passages. So flipping that, okay, let's have the students read the passage. Let's have the students answer the questions. If they don't do well on it, then let's go back and let's teach from the assessment. So one of the things the instructional coaches and the principals and the accreditation chairs talked about was just building in opportunities within the day to build up that stamina, because really the only time they're seeing a test like that is FastBridge and state assessment. If you are not doing those type of assessments any other time, they aren't going to make it. And you know, when I first started teaching, we didn't have all this technology, but now they do. And so kids are so used to that instant gratification and I'm done. And so we've got to help them build that up. So it's really a practice thing. And that's really what the buildings have been talking about. How can we do this starting in kindergarten? It doesn't start when we're in third grade when we start doing state assessments. So I don't have the exact details, but that's what they're working on. And practicing on their Chromebooks too. Many years ago, we had computer labs, and I do think when kids left the classroom and went into the computer labs to take the state assessment or the MAPS assessment, it felt a little bit higher stakes. Now they do it in their classrooms, so it's kind of relaxed. So just helping them understand, okay, testing time is serious time, and we're going to focus, and we're not going to click on other tabs and things like that. So there are a lot of strategies to that. We've talked a lot about test taking as almost its own genre. So knowing how to take a multiple choice test, knowing how to, like, let's go read the questions first and then go read the passage so I know what I'm looking for. You have to teach students how to take tests. It's not teaching the test, it's teaching them how to analyze it. So we've talked about that too.
Okay, I promise just one more last question. So, and maybe I'm like bad at reading the graphs because the ones with the stars kind of confuse me. I know that like the stars are not your guys' thing, but so on math in particular, and I went back to my notes from the last time we looked at math because this was true in October as well, that math is like declining after third grade. Like it seems like they peak in third grade, which surprises me because I would imagine that the more you're in school, the better you are getting at math, but that is not what the graph is showing to my understanding. So I was just wondering about that and what we could do to help improve our high schoolers in math.
So that was that one thing that Dr. Cardula talked about. Those gaps in math are much more difficult to fill the older you get than the reading ones. When you're looking at reading, it's just a skill at a higher text level. When you're looking at math, there are definite skills that you learn at each grade. And that was one of the reasons we've got the resources to get that consistency. So we already knew that between COVID, between the fact that we didn't have that consistent resource at elementary, and people are teaching it at different levels and different levels of understanding, that gaps were being created. One of the reasons the implementing the math resource was so hard was as the teachers started. I remember the first lead teacher meeting, and they were almost all in tears. And these are your lead teachers. They can't do that. This is too difficult. And some of the grade levels were grade levels I taught, and they were standards and skills that I was familiar teaching. But because we didn't have that consistency and that expectations, kids are really performing at a lower level. So in third grade, what we believe is going to happen is that you're going to start seeing that increase, and it's going to start happening. But when you are a 9th grader, a 10th grader, an 8th grader, and you've already had these gaps, and you think about, we have 16 third grade teachers who may have been interpreting things a little bit differently, even though we had these conversations. Now I go into 4th grade, there's 16 more, so now that's 32 teachers that may be looking at it differently. By the time I get to 8th grade, how many teachers are these 8th grade teachers having to answer to instruction? So it's not, I think the struggle with math is there is no quick fix for that when it comes to the upper levels. Their gaps are just too big, and what we're asking some teachers to do is to do 3 years of instruction in one. And so really their priority is going to, okay, where are we at? Now we've got to lift it up here. And so they may not get to that grade level standards because there's just not enough time and the gaps are too big. Another piece when we're looking at secondary, and I think one of the things that the high school really looked at and did a good job of this year, but you're still going to see that gap on state assessment, is they looked at that 8th grade data. They looked at where the kids ended on their state assessment, where they did on FastBridge, and they determined you're not ready for Algebra 1 or you are. So a lot of kids were placed in the pre-algebra or the algebra essentials because they weren't ready for Algebra 1. Now, the downfall of that is that when they go to take the state assessment in 10th grade, they won't have been exposed to all those standards. So you're not going to see the increase that you need to see, that you want to see, that we all want to see. The positive side of that is that kids are learning those skills. And when we're thinking about life and our purpose and our mission, we need kids to learn it. So maybe it'll be their junior year before they have all those skills. We've already passed that sophomore level, but they will be more firm in those skills. So the high schools they have really looked at how many different ways can we fill those gaps. And then in looking at the middle school, because it really is more difficult than secondary. We're coming back down. Middle school is looking at, okay, how can we differentiate within our classes? Because we have kids that are ready to go. They need to move faster, and we have kids that just can't move that fast because there's skill deficits. So we're having those conversations. So elementary has those intervention pieces in it, but the upper levels are filling more gaps. Now, what I would like to start seeing is that 4th grade now starts showing improvement, and 5th grade starts showing improvement, because as that happens, then it will get better for secondary, but it's slow, and I don't have a better answer for that than that just the gaps are real. And that's what we saw, and was why we started with math first with the resource adoption. Does that help? That was a long explanation.
I know we need to allow time for the resource to continue working, and I will be patient because you guys are really doing good work.
We're kind of impatient ourselves. So when we see the progress that we do see, we want to celebrate that too, because the teachers are really working hard at it. But it is hard because kids don't get to do the year over, right? They only get 1 year in 3rd grade, we hope. We only get 1 year in 3rd grade. We only get 1 year in 5th grade.
Yeah.
So yeah, we want to see that growth too.
I feel like it's also like, not to get super philosophical here, but it's a cultural problem. Like, how many of us say we're bad at math? We tell our kids, oh, that was my worst subject in school. Oh, I did so bad at math. Don't ask me for help with math. I don't know math. And like, there was even, you probably weren't even alive, but when I was 12, there was a Barbie that literally said math is hard. Like, there's so much out there. And teachers probably don't even think about it, who are like, well, there was no way I was going to be a math teacher. That's why I teach social studies. Like, you don't even, but you don't even think about it, but how much negativity there is around math that automatically makes kids think that they're also bad at math.
Yeah.
But everybody can be pretty okay at math. We're all doing addition and subtraction every single day, but there's just so much negativity, and I don't know how to change that.
I do think there's a couple of other really important pieces. When the standards changed so many years ago, when Common Core came, what we all learned in 5th grade is now at 3rd grade. What 7th grade is at 5th grade. So some of this math developmentally is really difficult for our kids. So that's something to remember. The other piece, when we were talking about that stamina for assessments, it goes for daily work too. Kids give up really easily. And teachers are always trying to figure out how can I get them. As a teacher, you start feeling like they can't do it. And it's not that. The kids give up, so teachers are trying to figure out what strategies can we use to get kids be willing to try and not give up so fast. So those are 2 other pieces that they are battling right now.
Judy, you can stay. I really liked what you said about when kids got to the high school and there were some assessments done to see which math class they should be placed in, which I think makes a lot of sense because, when my son started college, he had to do a math placement exam. So it's kind of funny how they do that in college, and so I'm glad that we're using some of the same techniques in high school. One of the things that I see on the math challenges is that there are many skill levels of students in one classroom, which makes it difficult to meet all students' needs. And so I assume some of those early math assessments will help with that.
Mm-hmm.
That's just something that I've always had in my mind also. It is a great teacher who can take every student and meet every need, but what can we do as a district to make that easier for them?
Sometimes I feel like I'm a little slow at picking up on things because this year I was having a meeting at the middle school and it was about math, and it dawned on me, I believe in differentiation. I am a teacher and I believe in differentiation, but in thinking about what the high school has done, I think that we need to look at that as well as at the middle school level, because we want to differentiate, but it has to be realistic in what we can differentiate in the class. And if you have students in one classroom that are 2 or 3 grade levels behind, we're not talking in special education, they shouldn't be, but they just have that big of a gap. And then you have students that really need to be trucking like that. It is really difficult for a teacher to differentiate that much, because you literally could have a situation where you need 5 different math groups in your classroom and you've got a 50-some minute block of time. So one thing that we could do is looking at, same thing, let's look at the 5th grade scores as we're getting ready to go into 6th grade. Where could we about group kids? You're still going to have to differentiate within your class, but maybe that divide, that gap, that levelization isn't so much. We don't want kids to feel like they're levelized. We don't want to track kids at all, but we might be able to meet their needs better and push the kids who can move faster, because some of them are being held back because we can't keep the class going, but maybe fill in some gaps so that the others can also move faster. So just looking at the data differently and seeing if there's a way that we can do that at other levels too. So.
Okay, but I want to support what Judy was just saying, because the reality of teaching in secondary is, and I know that I don't work in a very big school compared to our high school here, that you have so many students. So you're talking about, you have students that are excelling and need enrichment and they need more. And you have students that are 2 to 3 grade levels behind, and then you might have 250 students and they are all struggling with that. So the reality of that workload is really real for our teachers. And I applaud what they are doing, because I could not work with that many students at once. They're doing so much. It's great.
I just want to emphasize, whatever you need from us to make it easier for the teachers to teach all the kids, they're doing great work, but it's our job to make sure that they are supported and that you're supported and getting them what they need. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay,
All
well,
right,
thank you all so much. This was an amazing report. I'm really impressed by all you've done, so thank you. Allison, are you sure you don't want to do your superintendent highlight now?
I had about 30 minutes, so
Okay, great. That's what I was hoping you'd say.
I'll save it.
The next item on our agenda is item 10A, the future board calendar dates. They are all listed out for us. We have meetings on April 10th, April 24th, at 6 p.m. right here at Mary Herbert Education Center. On May 1st, we are attending the staff recognition at the White Civic Auditorium at 5 p.m., and then we will be back here on May 8th at 6 p.m. for our regular board meeting. Item 11A, a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Please cast your vote.
I think we're going to have to do a hand vote because my board docs shut down during that time. So if you could please raise your hand. Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you so much, everyone. Good night.